This is a fictional story. It's about a woman who saw something she was never supposed to see. Her name was Mara. She worked nights, long after the city went quiet. She liked being unnoticed. She moved through the empty streets like a ghost, a silent observer of a sleeping world. The late-night cleaning shift at the downtown office tower gave her a sense of peace. No one to talk to, no one to bother her. Just the rhythmic hum of the floor buffer and the city lights twinkling below. Mara believed that when no one notices you, you feel safe. Invisibility was her shield. For years, it had worked perfectly. She was a footnote in the lives of others, a shadow passing in their periphery, and that's exactly how she wanted it. She believed that anonymity was the highest form of security, a promise that the world's troubles would simply pass her by, unaware of her existence. She had built her life around this principle, carefully curating a routine that kept her away from prying eyes and unwanted attention. But safety is an illusion, a fragile thing that can shatter in an instant. One night, she took a different route home, a shortcut she'd never used before. The usual subway line was down for maintenance, forcing her onto a path she didn't know. It was a narrow, winding alleyway, a shortcut that promised to shave 10 minutes off her walk. The rain had just started, slicking the pavement and muffling the city's distant hum. It felt like stepping into another world, a forgotten corridor between the towering steel and glass giants. That's when she heard it. A brief, distant shout, sharp and sudden, cutting through the gentle patter of the rain. It wasn't a cry for help, not exactly. It was tense, angry. It made the hair on her arms stand up. She stopped, her body freezing instinctively. Peeking around the corner of a dumpster, she saw blue and red lights reflecting off the wet brick walls, pulsing silently, painting the alley in strobing, unnatural colors. There was no siren, just the silent, rhythmic flashing that signaled something was wrong. She stayed hidden, pressing herself against the cold, damp wall, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She saw 2 officers speaking with a man. He was leaning against the wall, his hands visible. But something felt wrong. The officers weren't just talking. Their stances were rigid, their movements sharp and aggressive. The voices were tense, low and guttural, like the growl of a cornered animal. Mara couldn't make out the words, only the feeling behind them, a chilling undercurrent of menace. The air was thick with it, a palpable tension that made it hard to breathe. Then, everything went quiet. A sudden, deafening silence that was more alarming than the shouting had been. The pulsing lights continued their silent dance on the walls, but the scene was unnervingly still. The man was no longer standing. Mara knew she shouldn't be there. This was a private, dangerous moment she had stumbled into by mistake. Her first instinct was to run, to melt back into the shadows and forget what she'd seen. But another part of her, a part she didn't know existed, felt compelled to document it. She reached for her phone, her fingers fumbling with the cold metal. As she pulled it from her pocket, it slipped from her trembling grasp, hitting the wet ground with a small, sharp tap. The talking had stopped, but that tiny sound was enough. It echoed in the sudden silence of the alley. One of the officers, a silhouette against the flashing lights, turned his head, his gaze sweeping the darkness, landing right where she was hidden. His face was a mask of shadow, but she felt his eyes on her. Mara didn't wait. She didn't think. She just left. Turning on her heel, she walked away, fast but not running, trying to look casual, like someone who was simply passing by. Her footsteps echoed on the wet pavement, each one a hammer blow against her own ears. She didn't look back, afraid of what she might see if she did. The next morning, the local news reported a routine incident in the downtown area. A disturbance was handled, an individual taken into custody. The report was brief, clinical, and utterly forgettable. Nothing unusual, nothing to question. The world moved on, accepting the simple, sanitized version of events without a second thought. But Mara remembered every second. She remembered the tension, the silence, the way the man was standing one moment and gone the next. She knew what she saw didn't match what she heard later on the news. The official story was a neat, tidy box, but the truth she'd witnessed was messy, chaotic, and terrifying. It played on a loop in her mind, a ghost that refused to be exorcised by a bland news report. That evening, she noticed a vehicle parked across the street from her apartment building. A plain, dark sedan. It wasn't flashing its lights. It was just sitting there, waiting, watching. Every time she glanced through her blinds, it was still there, a silent, ominous presence. The engine was idling, a low, persistent rumble that seemed to vibrate through her floorboards. Later, someone knocked on her door. Not a hard, demanding knock, but a soft, polite tapping. When she opened it, 2 men in simple suits stood there. They asked questions about her route home the previous night, about whether she'd seen anything out of the ordinary. They were polite. Too polite. Their smiles didn't reach their eyes, and their questions felt less like an inquiry and more like a warning. They said memories can be unreliable, especially under stress. They suggested she might be mistaken about what she thought she saw, that the mind can play tricks, that shadows and rain can create illusions. They were planting a seed of doubt, trying to make her question her own sanity, to rewrite her own memory. Just as they were leaving, one of them paused and looked her directly in the eye. "It's best to forget about things that don't concern you," he said, his voice dropping the polite facade for just a second. Later that night, her phone vibrated. A new message from an unknown number. It contained only 5 words, typed out slowly, deliberately. "Be careful what you remember." Mara didn't respond. She stared at the message, the glowing letters a clear and direct threat. They were trying to erase her experience, to gaslight her into silence. But they had misjudged her. The fear they intended to instill had morphed into something else. Resolve. She opened her phone's gallery, selecting the short, shaky video she had managed to record before dropping it. It wasn't much, just a few seconds of pulsing lights and tense silhouettes. She uploaded what she had, not to the police, not to the news. She sent it to an anonymous online journalist, someone known for digging into stories the mainstream media wouldn't touch. She wrote no accusations. She offered no context. She just sent the footage. Later that night, the power in her entire apartment building went out. A deep, sudden darkness fell, accompanied by an unsettling silence. Then her neighbors heard shouting from her apartment, sharp, panicked voices followed by a heavy thud. Someone called the police. By the time they arrived, Mara's apartment was empty, the door left wide open. Officials who investigated called it a misunderstanding. A domestic dispute, they said. The woman had simply packed a bag and left. Mara was never seen again. Her job, her apartment, her very existence seemed to fade away, as if she had been a ghost all along. But sometimes, in the dark corners of the internet, the footage reappears. A grainy, 10-second clip of flashing lights in a rain-slicked alley, and with it, a new comment will sometimes appear from an anonymous account with a woman's profile picture. The comment is always the same. "I remember.